the top 20% of his hands. I hope that the top 9% of the 20% he is playing. There, that makes sense. But anyways, kings is way ahead. So I bet like 2/3 pot, which is pretty standard. So I'm going to go for kind of like standard sized bets without any reason. Continue to bet the turn. And I go ahead and get raised. This is a pretty substantial raise, especially considering that, it's essentially just all in against me, right? Like, this is just a shove or fold situation for me. And I feel like even though I do have the king of hearts here, I'm just usually not getting the correct odds to try and draw against either possibly the made nut flush, but usually it looks like he just has a flush here. And definitely I can put a lot of small suited cards into his range here. So I'm just going to give credit. This also can be like an awkward hand like 10-7. It could be a hand like, pocket 7s, pocket 4s. And very rarely this can be a hand like jacks with the jack of hearts, which is just going ahead and raising my turn bet because I bet 35 and he just must have thought, oh, jacks with the jack of hearts is good. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm also noticing that Shihei folds to c-bets 72% of the time. But raises 2 out of 3 on the turn. I actually didn't know that, which might make this a mistake to fold. But if he's folding a lot on the flop, that means he's generally having a pretty strong range on the turn, so I don't know how much weight I can give to this without seeing showdowns or having a meaningful sample. But I do think this is a pretty standard fold without any reads. This hand, was one where I might have misplayed, but I'm not exactly sure. So, sight winner here. He's kind of a looser player. He seems to be a good regular in these games. He's pretty aggressive. It looks like it looks like he doesn't barrel the turn a lot, and he floats flops a decent amount of the time. Right, his fold to c-bet's 38, albeit again over a very small sample. But he seems generally aggressive, not just giving up a lot. The one thing I will notice is that when you check to him, it seems like he bets quite a bit. That's what this 92 means, that 92% of the time over, again, a relatively small sample. He's been stabbing, so against someone who's very stab happy, I definitely want to have a check calling range against him. I think that because he has a fairly high 3-bet, that a lot of the hands that are better than mine on this flop are going to just go ahead and 3-bet pre-flop, like pocket 10s, pocket queens. So the only hand that I'm really worried about running into here is pocket 3s. So this is a spot where, against sight winner, I can profitably check call for 3 streets as long as the board doesn't run out, ridiculous. So I start by checking, and bets 12, which is a larger bet size, definitely, and it makes me a little bit concerned, but I have ace-queen, so I'm not really going anywhere. So I call, turns a blank, and he ends up betting like half pot, which is, pretty good for me. Very often this is like ace-10 to king-queen kind of hand strength, so it's like, sometimes jacks, sometimes like, king-10 suited, which this guy definitely can have because there's a decent gap between his VPIP and PFR. So I end up calling, and the river's a king, and he bets really, really small. The problem here is that I'm only bluff catching, and given his bet sizing, he's not going to be bluff catching that, or he's not going to be barreling as a bluff that often. I mean, the king looks like it improved a lot of my hands. There's a possibility I have king-jack here, in which case I'm not going to fold. I can have king-queen here a lot, in which case I'm not going to fold. I can have pocket kings here as well, but I think that's going to be in the minority of my range. Pocket kings probably bets the flop, although ace-queen, obviously bets the flop as well. So this is, kind of an awkward spot, but because I'm getting such a good price, he's not making my life too difficult here. I actually do end up calling, and he shows me pocket queens, and this is well played by him. I like his bet sizing, just kind of keeping me in. When I from his point of view, when I check call this flop, my hand always looks like ace-10 or pocket jacks, right? My hand rarely looks like ace-queen, especially because he has pocket queens, which are blockers to the hand. So it's rare that I have the only other queen out there, so he shouldn't be going for massive bet sizes. The king looks like a pretty scary card for a lot of my range if he puts me on like jacks or 10s, so he goes for kind of a smaller bet. If he knew my hand, he would have gone for bigger bets on every street, but fortunately I was able to get away relatively cheaply here. So just gonna continue with the review of the hands that I lost. Raise aces here. The huge fish calls over 11 hands. This guy has a quarter stack. He's played 73% of his hands, so he just looks like kind of a moron. I start by checking to him, just because over this very small sample, this guy always folds to c-bets, but always stabs when you check to him, and he just looks dumb and crazy. So start by just check calling, check the turn just to shove and just get it all in, and he ends up calling with a 6, which is a fantastic result. And, you know, this is a spot where if I had bet the flop on the turn, he might have actually gotten away from his hand. Well, I mean, this guy might not have gotten away from, but other fish might. But, you know, he spews into me, but he hits the 6 on the river and makes $50. Good for him. This was a spot where I actually may have misplayed, but I'm not sure. This is actually definitely a mistake. So, in my database at the time, Rip Connive looked really, really nutso. He is a regular player, which should probably have indicated to me that his stats would calm down over a larger sample. But I ended up flatting here with King Queen. I much prefer 3-bet or folding against a middle position raise, so I really don't like this peel. And this hand is a perfect example of why peeling here gets you into some trouble. So it folds. He c-bets and I call, which is just very standard. I have a pair. I have a very good queen here. I have the nut queen. Turn, he ends up betting again on a card which looks like it should hit the overwhelming majority of my flop calling range, right? Like, how many hands do I have here that the king did not improve? Only, like, exactly, like ace-jack or ace-10, so I don't think that he's going to bluff here very often. I end up peeling again simply because, I mean, there's a possibility that he has some kind of draw that improved, like he could have had a backdoor, you know, like 10x of clubs that now picked up a gut shot on the turn that he's continuing to fire. But I'm calling here and generally starting to shut down when I get to the river. And he bets $75, which is pretty big. Essentially, I'm bluff catching with King Queen, and the problem is I just don't think that there are that many bluffs in Rip Connive's range here. The one thing that I will say, though, is that looking at his continuation betting frequencies, it looks like he bets 93% on the flop, 75% on the turn, and always bets the river, which as a 16-14 player, which is a looser player for sure, I don't know if those stats are going to be profitable in the long run. In fact, there's absolutely no way they can be, simply because he's going to just get called down lighter and lighter, and it's going to make his bluffs less and less effective. But I didn't have this information at the time, so I don't know if this is going to be a call. If I went back here, I'd probably still fold King Queen, because I think it shows discipline when I don't have a lot of information. And this is a fold that I don't think a lot of people make, but, you know, what am I beating when you bet 75 into 100 there? I'm sure a lot of people are like, man, what a nit. Going over some other hands. This will be closing out the hands section. There's a limper. There's a small isolation. I'm a little bit deep with both of my opponents, so I end up calling. And here, Delavan makes this tiny, tiny 3-bet. If I look at how much money he's got behind, $184, and look at the pot size, which according to Hold'em Manager is already 40, that means I'm getting, let's see, 1 in 18 or so on my call to crack him. So this is, you know, just sheerly a math problem. It's 12 to win, you know, 122, and because Delavan is so incredibly tight, he's playing 11-5 with a very, very small 3-bet. It's just really, really likely that this is not a bluff. And if he's got aces or kings here, that's trying to suck me in. But the problem with making it so small is that you're letting me play absolutely perfectly when I have a pocket pair. You know, it's like every time I miss the flop, I can just fold my hand, realizing that my pre-flop call was profitable. And then every time I hit a set, my opponent is just going to always dump his entire stack to me. So I end up peeling and flop the goodness. He bets really small, and I like this. I like this bet size because it is a large inflated pot. It's a large bloated pot, so he doesn't actually have to bet that much to get it in. If he bets $20 here, the turn will be $90, and he can bet like 45. And then I'll call, so the river will be like 180, and I'll have like 120 left to shove. So the money's going to go in almost no matter what he bets on the flop. He bets by 20. I end up just start by calling. He bets 20 again. I want to make sure all the money goes in really comfortably by the river, so I just make a very, very small raise. And he shoves, and I snap off, and he's got aces. Very fortunately, he doesn't have kings here. But he was, you know, when people make these really, really small bets pre-flop, his very small 3-bet is more indicative of aces than kings, because with kings, people are a little bit more worried about an ace running out and killing all their action. So, I raise sevens from middle position and get called by the very, very tight big blind. He checks and I just bet. I just bet my entire range here. There's going to be a lot of times where he's got like pocket nines, pocket jacks, pocket tens, pocket eights. A lot of the hands that are slightly better than mine that I'm going to get to fold. Also, all the times where he doesn't have a pair, I just want to just bet and go ahead and protect my hand. So he calls. Turn is gin for me. When I bet on the turn, I'm really only trying to extract from his aces range. If he's got queens here, kings, I generally think they're just going to fold the turn because I look very strong when I double barrel under the gun versus big blind. So because I'm only trying to extract from the aces, I just go ahead and bet 24 into 29, which is a pretty large bet. And against a observant opponent, he should realize what's going on here and play very cautiously with, like ace queen. Like if he has ace queen here somehow, I actually don't. I say somehow because I don't think ace queen is a profitable call pre-flop. But if he has ace queen here, I'm going to be able to put him into a lot of gross positions on the river if he calls this turn. But if he folds here, I mean, I don't like folding ace queen there, but that's a problem with calling. He ends up leading a little more than half pot on the river. I think he's got ace king or ace queen here. I don't think that because he's so tight and he called an early position open, he can have ace 7 or ace deuce here, so I'm not really worried about him having a full house. This is just a blocker with ace king or ace queen, so I end up shoving on him, and he calls and he has ace king. So I think he played the hand pretty poorly. The thing is, by the river, if I have a bluff, if he leads, I just fold when I have a bluff. And if I have another ace, like, there are not that many aces I have on the river that I'm not going to bet. Like, if I have ace jack, I guess I might check the river, but I'm not going to call the river lead with ace jack here because, my opponent is playing his hand so strongly and obviously. Ace queen he might get value from, but if I have ace queen, I'm going to bet the river myself, and I'm probably actually going to bet a larger amount. So I really think that his river lead is bad. He just plays his hand incredibly face up and makes all my decisions easy and allows me to make, my decisions really hard on him. The under the gun guy limps. He's playing 8-3 at the time, but I really don't have that much information on him. I'm sorry. He's playing 8-3 in my database now, but at the time I didn't have that much information on him, so I'm just going to treat him just like a bad player. Go ahead and isolate, and I see a four-way pot, which is not fantastic. Here, Thomas Beal is I believe he's a sponsored Full Tilt Pro. He's pretty tight. He folds a lot to c-bet, so I'm generally just going to proceed and try to not put any money in against him. I think that when he wants to play for stacks, he's always got a set or 2-3, I guess he could have occasionally, but I doubt that he has that. But he's going to show up with 2s and 3s when all the money goes in. There are 2 fish in this pot, so I do need to bet just to go ahead and protect my hand and begin to build a pot. I do get ace of spades to fold and Thomas Beal to fold, and I'm just really happy that Thomas folds because, in my eyes at the time, AAA hand is just a total fish. So he ends up peeling, turns a blank. He checks. I bet like, a little bit more than half pot. Just something to keep his palate wet. At the time, he didn't seem like an absolutely atrocious limp caller because he might have had some semblance of tightness when I played this hand, but he didn't seem like the 46-17 kind of drooler that I want to bet $60 against. So I wanted to exercise a little bit of caution. I think here he had like pocket nines a lot. Or a set, right? So against either one of those hands, I don't want to just pot the turn. He ends up calling. He checks the river, so I bet 95, just now trying to really extract from his like pocket jacks or his king queen or queen jack type hands. I don't think that he limped because he limped under the gun. He can have queen 10, although sometimes he will have that hand, which would be bollocks for me. This is kind of a thin bet if I knew that he was playing 8-3, because then he could definitely have like aces, queens, 2s, and 3s here more often. But at the time, I didn't think that he was quite this nitty, so I went for this bet, and it ends up paying off because my opponent seems to be a complete monkey. So, everyone says, "Oh, online poker's too hard. Everyone plays too good," and yet here they are monkeying off for $350 with a pair of 3s. So I think those mark most of the interesting hands for the session, or just the hands that I guess were not that interesting, but a lot of them were very standard, but I think that they were important to review. Again, I'm looking for the big winners, the big losers, some of the more interesting medium-sized pots, just to make sure that I wasn't making too big of mistakes.